Seattle, 8:44 a.m. No rain. But the air hung heavy like even the sky was holding its breath. Langridge Hall was already stirring sleek glass walls, polished stone floors, champagne in fluted glasses before 9 a.m. This wasn't just an auction. It was a ritual for the well-fed and overly confident. Harper Lin stepped through the revolving door. No one held it open. She wore a pale linen dress, simple, unbranded, almost fragile. A canvas tote hung from one shoulder, faded at the seams. Her chestnut waves were loosely pinned back. No makeup, no name tag. She moved quietly through the lobby, passing under banners that read, Future Grove Rebirth from Sacred Ground Auction Event Redevelopment of Parcel 7. Former St. Agnes Orphan School. They called it Parcel now, not the school, not the sanctuary, not the place where a child once learned that kindness didn't need to be loud to be real. At the registration table, Harper filled out the form like everyone else. But when she handed it in, the woman behind the desk didn't bother with a smile. Her eyes flicked from Harper's shoes to her bag to her name on the form, pausing just long enough to register her disapproval. Observers sit at the back, she said crisply. Only verified investors may enter the reserved zone. Her tone wasn't rude, just rehearsed, like she'd said this to people like Harper before, people who didn't look expensive enough to belong. Harper nodded once, took her seat card without a word. She walked alone down the gallery hallway, past easels displaying renderings of the future development glass pavilions. Yoga domes, spa suites, all built on what used to be a playground. One mock-up caught her eye, a mirrored meditation chamber labeled Silent Room, right where the old chapel used to stand. She was still looking when two men walked past navy blazers, no socks, $1,000 grins. Bet the nuns never imagined their holy land would have a juice bar, one joked. They laughed, then noticed her. Sorry, are you with catering or setup? The question came too casually. Harper looked at them, calm, almost gentle. No, she said. I used to live here. They blinked. One of them gave an awkward half nod, half smirk. But she had already turned away. At the far end of the corridor hung an old black and white photograph, the orphan school decades ago. Children lined up in uniforms, some smiling, some serious. On the edge of the row, a little girl holding a book almost bigger than her torso. Harper rested her hand on the glass. That was her no one in this building knew. No one needed to, because today wasn't about being seen. Today was about seeing who had come to buy and who had come to bury. She stepped into the auction chamber, not as a bidder, not yet, as a witness, and the room didn't even realize they were the ones being watched. The room looked like any luxury conference space, polished wood-bottled water that cost more than groceries. Chairs spaced just so. But beneath the surface it was a battlefield, the kind where the only blood spilled was memory. Harper sat in the last row. No fanfare, no welcome. Just a small white card with the number 47 in crisp, black ink. Observer, she watched as the others entered, men in tailored blazers and vintage Rolexes. Women in monochrome dresses and sharp heels that echoed off the floor like punctuation. Laughter floated through the air like smoke, practiced, privileged, utterly detached. Slate Capital is here, someone murmured nearby. If Leonard wins the bid, the whole block turns into wellness condos by spring, Leonard Slate. She turned her head just slightly and saw him. He looked like every picture of wealth that forgets what it took to build. Hair silvered with just the right imperfection. Watch, glinting smile. Clean, wide, and cold. There's nothing sacred in undeveloped land, she heard him say. Only stories waiting to be rewritten. Harper's fingers curled slightly around the edge of her tote. She hadn't planned to speak today. She had only come to bear witness, but something in his voice, the arrogance of owning without asking, made her chest tighten. The auctioneer walked to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the redevelopment auction of Parcel 7, formerly known as the St. Agnes Orphan School. A polite ripple of murmured greetings. Harper's eyes flicked to the floor, the same marble now shining over where the chapel once stood. The auctioneer continued. We'll begin bidding at $12 million. You may raise your cards when ready. Almost instantly a card shot up, then another, then three more. Each number, each name meant another memory being unstitched. She watched as one man leaned to his lawyer. "If we can clear the zoning permit, we can knock it all down by Q3. Another voice softer. "Leave the bell tower adds character. We'll charge extra for historic preservation." The room was warm, but Harper felt cold. She thought of Sister Agnes, the last nun who stayed after the order left, who'd taught her to read with an old copy of Jane Eyre and made her tea with honey from the backyard hive. Sister Agnes had died on that land. Harper had held her hand when the light left her eyes, and now that ground was just available inventory. The number cards rose higher, so did the bids. 13 million, 14, 5, $15, 2, all offered like casual gestures, like it was paper, not memory. They were slicing through. Harper didn't move, didn't flinch, but inside her tote under the soft canvas flap rested a folder, thick stamped, signed by a lawyer who had once knelt next to her in chapel years ago, a letter, a will, and a name written in long-forgotten ink. To Harper Lin, the last daughter of this home, and suddenly the room didn't feel as large, because beneath all their wealth, all their certainty, sat something they didn't expect, a rightful heir, and she was about to speak. $15.6 million. The bid echoed softly across the room like a polished blade. Leonard Slate leaned back in his seat, satisfied, as if history itself was now a portfolio asset. The auctioneer adjusted his mic. Going once. Harper rose. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The weight of a woman standing when no one expects her to has its own kind of silence. The auctioneer paused, heads turned, a few furrowed brows, a few scoffs. One woman leaned to her husband and whispered, "Who is she?" Harper walked calmly toward the front. One step, then another. Her linen dress brushed softly around her calves. Her tote whispered against her hip. She arrived at the platform and gently placed something on the edge of the podium, a leather folder, old but well kept, its brass clasp worn smooth from time. "I won't be bidding," Harper said. The auctioneer blinked. "Ma'am, this is a private session. Unless I have authority to intervene," she interrupted gently, eyes steady. Then she opened the folder. Inside, a notarized letter from Sister Agnes, a signed covenant from 1998 preserved in diocesan records, a witness statement from a former trustee, and finally, a legal transfer of protective guardianship over the land, dated and sealed under the 501c3 nonprofit that once owned the school, all listing one name, Harper Lin. The room shifted, not physically, spiritually. What had once been a room of buyers became a room of trespassers. Harper turned toward the crowd, her voice still quiet, but now it held the weight of stone. This land isn't just old, it isn't just sacred, it's still bound by a promise. She held up the letter. Sister Agnes never filed dissolution. She held the charter until her death. I was under her care. I was the last child in St. Agnes. A pause. And I was named its steward. Leonard Slate stood half in disbelief. That's impossible. That land was released from all protective claims. Our lawyers reviewed every corporate filing, Harper asked. Probably, she tapped the parchment, but not the handwritten ones. Silence. You read the spreadsheets. I lived the prayers. The auctioneer turned to the legal advisor in the corner who was now flipping through a binder with trembling fingers. 30 seconds of silence followed. Then he stood and said 2 words no one in that room expected. She's right. In that moment, the auction was no longer active, because authority doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply arrives linen dress, soft eyes canvas tote, and a signed piece of history no one had thought to honor. No one spoke. Even the glass windows seemed to hold still, as if the building itself were listening now. Harper stood not as a bidder, not as a protester, but as a woman holding the deed to a memory no one else in the room had lived through. The auctioneer had stepped aside. The legal advisor was on the phone with headquarters. Leonard Slate was still standing, arms crossed, face unreadable, but jaw clenched. Harper turned toward him. "I know what this land is worth to people like you," she said. "A view, a location, a legacy you can rewrite with marketing." But to me, it's where I learned the meaning of enough. Silence again. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to protect something. Then she reached into her tote one more time. Out came a second folder I've prepared. A proposal, she said. A cooperative trust. A public-private hybrid model. She scanned the room slowly, deliberately. It allows part of the land to be developed modestly. Respectfully, low-impact housing for foster transition programs. A trauma-informed educational center. A garden space where the chapel once stood. Open to all faith or no faith. People looked confused, or stunned, or both. It's already funded, she added. That turned heads. You funded it, someone asked, incredulous. I didn't say I funded it, Harper replied. I said it's funded. A quiet smile. There are people of this world who believe in building without erasing. Some of them were once kids like me. Others just chose better. She let the words settle. You'll get your square footage, just not your spires. You'll get your view, but not at the cost of ours. Slate finally spoke. Why make the offer at all, he said, his voice low. You've already won. Harper turned to him fully, because winning doesn't mean everyone else has to lose a beat. You all came here to purchase land. I came here to return it to purpose. The proposal was placed on the auctioneer's desk. She didn't ask for a vote. She didn't need permission. Legacy doesn't need applause. It just needs to outlast ego. They didn't report it on the news. No camera crews arrived, no ribbon cutting, no oversized scissors. But 3 months later, construction crews rolled in, not to tear down walls, but to clear ivy gently off brick, to lift the roof beams piece by piece, not to discard them, but to preserve. At the corner of the lot where developers once planned a spa retreat, dome workers broke ground instead for a modest 2-story building. No chandeliers, no valet, just sunlit classrooms and quiet bedrooms with windows that opened wide. On the foundation stone, a small plaque for every child who needed a home before the world knew their name, HL. Inside the library returned, same shelves, same smell of dust and dreaming. But now with fiber optic internet and e-readers funded by anonymous grants, one morning a girl no older than 10 walked through the rebuilt gate. She wore a second-hand hoodie, 2 sizes too big. Her shoes squeaked. Harper stood nearby, clipboard in hand, hair pulled back, same linen dress, only now with grass stains at the hem. She watched the girl hesitate on the threshold, eyes flicking toward the building like it might disappear. Harper knelt down. You hungry? The girl nodded. Come inside then. There's peanut butter toast and a dog named Stanley who thinks he's a therapy cat. The girl cracked a smile. Just barely, but it was enough. Harper rose and held the door open. As the girl walked past her, she paused and asked, almost embarrassed, do I have to earn it? Harper shook her head. You already did, just by showing up. Later that week, someone asked Harper why she didn't keep the land for herself. Turn it into a boutique school with a waiting list or a foundation under her name. She smiled. Because Sister Agnes never asked for a statue. She asked me to keep the light on. Years passed. The city changed as cities always do. Skyline grew teeth. Rent climbed mountains. Names on buildings came and went. But on the southern edge of Beacon Hill, tucked between a community clinic and a row of aging trees, the gates of St. Agnes Center still opened every morning. No one called it a miracle. It just existed. And that was enough. Inside the hallways buzzed, not with noise, but with the kind of motion that only happens when children begin to feel safe again. Laughter echoed off walls where silence used to sit. Backpacks hung on hooks beneath windows that once looked out on rubble. There was no plaque for Harper Lin inside. No portrait, no article, just a story that the staff told in fragments. She used to sleep here once, and she came back when it mattered. Some days, she visited early in the morning before the kids were awake. She'd sit at the end of the long corridor, sipping tea, reading old intake forms, and smiling at the terrible handwriting of caseworkers. She never interrupted. She never stayed long. But when she left, staff always found something better than a memo. A shelf stocked overnight with new books. Fresh paint quietly paid for. or a single envelope on the desk with the words, "No one falls alone." One rainy afternoon, the girl from that first reopening, now 15, stood by the window watching the mist blur the city. She turned to her counselor and asked, "Is it true this place almost got turned into a resort?" The counselor nodded. Why didn't they go through with it? She thought for a second, then said, "Because someone remembered what it used to feel like when nobody picked you." The girl nodded and smiled. On a quiet street in Seattle, there is no statue, no slogan, no shrine, only a school still standing because someone once stood for it.